Welcome back to Create Your Creations. Last week we started with drawing some animals. This week we're going to go even further and we're going to draw a second animal. We're going to do what is called an animal study. So study is just a combination of drawings that study the animal. So that's what we're going to do, and then once we've done our study, next week we'll start looking at animal skeletons and how we can figure out how animals move based on their skeletons. And then following the next 2 weeks, we're going to combine animals together to create our own creatures. So let's get started here. So this is kind of what we're doing. This is an animal study I did of a rabbit earlier in the day. So you can tell there's various parts of the rabbit. You can see the screen, but also see my iPad here. There we go. So I did a full body study, and then I did some head studies and some ear studies right here, and then like studies of his feet. So that's generally what a study will do, is you take, for an animal study, is you take parts of the animal and you figure out how to draw them. So we are going to draw moose today, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a thing called a jackalope, which is a bunny with antlers, and I thought it would be funny to put moose antlers on a bunny. So I'm actually going to switch the screen share right quick. So I have Google image search up, and I have Google image, I have moose, and then I have a space and then minus hunting, because I didn't want to see any hunting photos. So I added the minus so that Google would ignore the hunting photos. This moose right here that's got kind of bloody antlers, that's just, moose have something on their antlers called velvet early in the year, and then the velvet comes off, and it's sort of like it exposes the antler material underneath. So there's just a little bit of blood involved when that happens. It's nothing that really hurts the moose. So I did this so that I have pictures of the moose that I can reference, so that I can do my studies. And I especially want to do studies of antlers, but drawing the entire moose is pretty cool too. So let's see, big, that's a good picture of a moose. So I'm going to start with a profile picture. I'm going to move me out of the way, and there's a nice profile picture of a very large moose. So we're going to switch back to our Procreate. And just like I said last week, you don't have to do this digitally. You could do this with paper and a pencil, paper and color pencils, whatever you're feeling like. Just like I said last week, first thing we want to do is get started with our warm-ups. So we're just going to warm up our arms, stretch our arm a little bit, get our pencil going back. And now I hold my pencil back like this, and then I'm just going to start some circles, some lines, just anything to kind of get my arms up and moving, get the feel of my paper. Once I've got some lines in, I'm feeling pretty warmed up. Let's go ahead and get started and looking at that moose. So I'm looking at the moose on my computer, and then I'm going to work out how to draw him on the screen. So moose have a fairly big massive block. Remember last week we talked about finding shapes that we can build the moose out of. This moose has a fairly kind of a rounded triangle shape right at its shoulders. It's kind of like this, because he's kind of hump. And then it's got a kind of a circular, zoom out just a little bit. It's got a circular thing on his hindquarters, and he's got a nice big belly. So those are the two shapes in the line that I'm going to start with. And then we have got to get his head in here. So that's kind of triangle, sort of with a rectangle. And then we're going to just start with drawing a kind of a rectangle for his antlers, and then we can fill in the individual forks of his antlers later. I don't know if forks are what moose antlers are, the pieces of the moose antlers are called. Then we've got, well, this is already starting to be way too big. So the nice thing about digital is if I start going off the page, I can just make it smaller. So then we got circles, and I got a nice thing right here. A circle for his knee joint, another circle for his knee joint. There's a nice arc. So what I'm doing is I'm just drawing a guideline here because I'm sort of connecting all of his elbow joints or his knee joints along a particular line. So there's one there, kind of one right there. Oh, it's still too big. There we go. Sometimes that happens when you're starting to draw. You'll draw things and they'll just not be quite the right size. You have to work out how to fix them. So we got another circle for his legs, and kind of a triangle thing comes off of the circle. Another circle for kind of his ankle joint, and then his hooves kind of come off right there. Another circle, and his hooves, and then another circle, and another hoof. All right, so we kind of got a mess right now, so we got to connect everything. So his neck kind of goes like this, and then he's got a nice little sway back, kind of dips in, so that goes right there. And then this kind of comes down sort of like a cone shape. And then we've got another one coming out right here to this. And then that's coming out like that. And it's got a much bigger belly than I drew initially. If you don't get the proportions right the first time, you just draw them again. And then this one goes like this. And then down like this. And his head should be much bigger than it is, I think. Moose are really big animals. They are left over from the Ice Age. So they're called megafauna. Almost said megaflora, but flora means plants. They're known as megafauna, and they're really large. Moose are probably as big as a horse, and horses are pretty big. So that's a pretty good start. He's got a little beard going right there. His eyes somewhere in here. Let's make his hump a little bit more pronounced. Now we got to figure out how exactly to draw his antlers. So the picture I'm looking at isn't a great picture. Let me switch back and forth between my screen shares. So it's not a huge picture. So I really kind of need maybe a better picture of antlers so that I kind of understand, because these antlers are sort of running together and I can't tell where one side begins and the other side ends. So let's see if we can find a better picture of his antlers. I'm gonna keep the minus hunting because I don't want to see pictures of hunting, and just type moose antler. And antlers, there we go. That's pretty good. That'll help me draw. So I'm gonna look at this moose antler now. Moose drop their antlers every year, so this didn't hurt the moose. It just fell off at the end of the year, and then every year they grow new ones. So somehow his ears come out. I'll have to look for a picture of his ears, but looks like in his head there's kind of spike that goes out, but the majority of it kind of goes back off like this, and is sort of a rounded fan, kind of like this. Kind of looks like a dinosaur horn. And then it doesn't have to be perfect. If you make a mistake, you just erase it and you start over. Sometimes making a mistake is the best way to learn. All right, we're starting to get a moose here. All right. So we need to find a picture of how their ears sit. So I'm just looking at other pictures here. I don't think his ears go down like I thought they did. So I'm just gonna erase that part and we're gonna figure out how to redraw that. Get rid of that. So his ears actually sit back away from his head like this. Kind of like that, looks like. Let's go see if we can find another picture. Yeah. Maybe instead of sort of floppy like a basset hound, maybe his ears sit kind of up like that, more like a bunny. There we go. Horn sits like that. His ears sit like that. All right, so this is looking pretty good. So the next thing I would do is Google, what do moose feet look like? So again, I'm typing in moose and feet and then minus hunting because I don't want to see any bad hunting pictures. And that's giving me pictures of moose feet. And moose have 2 hooves, and then they have like a little third toe that goes off behind them. So you can see here, moose have, basically they have 2 toes, and the hard part of that is their fingernails. So they're walking on their toes. And then they've got a third toe that kind of hangs off the back here. So I'm gonna zoom in. Let's look at our picture here. And we got a toe kind of hanging off the back. And then kind of a rounded part that's his actual foot, and then his toenail. Maybe a little bit less. His hooves aren't quite that big. And do the same thing for that one. Kind of a rounded bit, and there's his toenail. Rounded bit. There's his toenail. Then this one, he's got his foot in there. Almost called it a paw. Got his foot in the air, so we're gonna draw that one like this, and we'll get the back side of that hoof. All right. So you know what I don't have on here is what does a moose tail look like? Oh, like a deer tail. Well, I know what that looks like. So deer tails kind of just come up like this on the back there. So that's looking pretty good. We kind of got ourselves a pretty good looking moose here. So we got a moose, and we've also talked about how to draw all the parts. Now, what we would do to do a study is we'd start with the full-size moose, but then maybe we would do some more studies of pieces of the moose. So if I wanted to look at their tail, do a study of the moose's tail. Looks like for the most part, moose keep their tails down, just like a deer, or not like a deer, but kind of close to their backs. So this probably is a little wrong. Let's erase that. And we'll just do a little nubby right like that. And it looks like, from the pictures I'm seeing, the way the back goes, his bum goes like this, kind of to a point, and then the tail just kind of hangs out just like that. So that would be how we start doing our study, is we understand how the animal is constructed by zooming in on various parts of the animal and drawing just those so that we know what they look like. So the part of the moose that I want for my jackalope is probably just the antlers. So I would want to do multiple studies of moose antlers. Figure out how they're constructed. So it looks like I'm drawing a moose here, and looks like they have a big fanny bit. It kind of fans out like this, and then a nice curvy bit that kind of goes down to where it attaches to their heads. This attaches to their heads, and then they always have like another lobe that goes out like this. So it's kind of like a tree. And there's always some spikes that go off of it. There's that. And then if the moose was straight on, so this would be the moose's head, straight on like this, then it comes out like this. And I'm using another photo I found in my search for moose antlers. And it comes out like this and sort of wraps around the back. The same thing goes out like this. And out like this. That's the head of the moose. So I'm looking at the moose, and maybe I don't want to use a moose for my jackalope because moose have quite big antlers and they have a lot of bone in them and they're really kind of large. Maybe I want to use something else like a deer instead so that the antlers don't get in the way of the bunny ears. So what I can do is I can kind of do a little bit of a comparative study by typing in deer antlers. Okay. So here we have some red deer antlers, and I can look and find some good pictures of that. Again, remember what I said about the moose is the same thing about the deer, is that they have velvet on their antlers. Here's one, see with them with the velvet and how it looks soft and fuzzy. And then this is after they shed their velvet. So if you see a picture like this where there's blood on their antlers, it's not necessarily that they've been in a fight. It's more that they're shedding the velvet off of their antlers. And I'm using Google image search, and I forgot to mention it, but you should always, if your adults limit your internet, you should always check with them before you're using Google image search. So let's do one of the deer. That's that one. That's kind of some crazy antlers there. So that's the one I'm going to look at, figure out how to draw that. So the deer's head is kind of a rectangle, goes out like this, and then kind of goes like this. And it's okay when you do a study if things overlap a little bit. Part of the reason why you're doing a study is just that very word, the word study. We're practicing and we're thinking about things and we're understanding how they work, which is ultimately what you want to do when you study things. So this isn't really an image that you would share. I mean, you certainly can, but isn't an image you would upload or share with people. This is really for you so that you can understand how that it's working so that you can draw it. So that's kind of why I haven't bothered to really clean up things or really do a lot to make them nice and pretty, is because studies aren't really supposed to be pretty. They're supposed to be for you so that you can understand how they work, and then you can do your final piece that's nice and pretty. So looks kind of like deer antlers are more along the lines of lines. So they're kind of like branches on a tree. You kind of go out like this. And that one's those antlers kind of go in crazy directions though. Kind of go out from the head like that. And this might be a better option for when I want to draw my jackalope, is because then I can imagine the ears of the bunny can come up behind like this and still tuck in. So that way there's room on the bunny's head for antlers. That's a nice one. Also looks like they have a nice spike. So I found another picture that kind of shows them having a spike that's coming out, which is kind of interesting and nice. As humans, we like seeing curves on things. There's some math involved in that, but curves are ideal, so we like seeing things that curve. So I would just continue studying this, practicing on antlers, figuring out how to draw things, and getting prepared to assemble all of my parts together. And we're going to talk about next week ideas on how to assemble our parts together by looking at skeletons. So skeletons are really great to look at. Animal skeletons are really great to look at because you can figure out how their joints move, how their joints bend, and how to draw things even without a photo reference if you understand how they work. So that's what we're going to look at tomorrow. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to sign off for today and just keep drawing. And next week we will have some fun looking at skeletons. See you next week.